Oklahoma became a state in November of 1907. As per tradition at the time, whenever a new state entered the Union, of course, a new star would be added to the U.S. flag. Governor Haskell commissioned around 100 women from across the state to come to Guthrie, which was the capital at the time, and sew a United States flag with 46 stars on it.
That was done in the spring of 1908, and then later on July the 4th of 1908, that flag flew over Independence Hall in Philadelphia for the Independence Day celebration. During the Constitutional Convention, there wasn't any mention of a state flag for Oklahoma, and it wasn't until 1911 when Ruth Clement took it upon herself to design a new state flag.
She went through a few designs before ultimately proposing the first state flag, which was the red field with the star at the center with 46.
As we start to get into the 1920s, red flags mean something completely different. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, a red flag starts to mean communism. And given the political situation in the early 1920s in Oklahoma, when you had the rise of the labor movement, you also had many people that, because of the economic conditions, that started to embrace socialism and communism. And so that flag started to fall out of favor. I think many Oklahomans had forgotten about the original red state flag until 2016, when a new license plate was designed with the design of the original state flag. In the middle of the license plate, it had the red star with the 46 on it. At the bottom, it had our state motto, Labor Omnia Vincit, which means work conquers all things. And it became a very popular license plate very quickly.
Well, I had seen, images of the flag, and I thought, you can do a specialized plate with the state legislature. And I thought, it'd be neat if we could get it done. And it's quite a process, but I just thought it would make a great visual and look good on a license plate.
By the mid-1920s, the original red state flag was really falling out of favor. And so Joseph Thoburn, who was the secretary of the Oklahoma Historical Society, he met with members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and he encouraged them to take on a project to change the state flag.
They sent out flyers all over the state for people to submit entries for the contest of what they wanted the flag to look like.
Louise Fluke came to the Oklahoma Historical Society offices in the basement of the Capitol, and she started looking for inspiration.
My husband didn't come home in those days for lunch, and I had most of the day to work on an idea. Knowing nothing about state flags and unable to find more than 4 or 5 black and white drawings at the Carnegie Library in my attempt at research, I took a small sketchbook and went several times to the state capitol on the rickety little streetcar that some of you remember, as I was nervous about driving in what I then considered heavy traffic. I made several trips, meeting Dr. Thoburn and being conducted about the Historical Society.
This is the part, as a historian, that's the aspect that I find most interesting about the story is, here's someone who is, who goes to the Historical Society, who is doing research and trying to find, okay, what is the essence of this place called Oklahoma?
Joseph Thoburn kind of pointed her in one direction, and he showed her the Choctaw regimental flag on the wall. And on that regimental flag, there was a Choctaw shield, and there were bows and arrows, and there was a tomahawk. And then on display was the Osage shield of Black Dog II, who had been a chief of the Osage Nation at one point. And this Osage shield had different symbology on it. It had eagle feathers, it had a bison tail, it had crosses, which actually represented stars.
So this shield has many aspects to it. Number one, in defense. And number two is that it tells a story. You can identify your people by the markings on it. It represents strength, it represents prayer, and on these war shields that you identified your position, and you also identified the efforts that you have already done. And it was under a class system, and that your warrior was trained at 7 and 9 by his elders, And then he is established into this hunting group. And this hunting group is later in turn into your war society.
This is owned by the Ponca City chapter DAR Museum, and it's one of her hand-painted flags that she did, and it's her writing is on the back telling what each symbol means and each piece. And again, it's hand-signed.
The blue of the field signifies devotion. The shield, defensive or protective warfare, but always surmounted by and subservient to the olive branch and peace pike, which betoken the love of peace on the part of a united people.
Louise Fluke won the contest, and the design was submitted ultimately to the legislature.
The state flag has undergone relatively few modifications since it was adopted in 1925, about 100 years ago now. In 1941, the most significant change occurred, and that was when the phrase Oklahoma was added underneath the shield insignia in white letters. Living in Oklahoma, the flag is a reminder for me that this is Indian country, and that this is a state that has multiple sovereignties to contend with, both at the state level and at the tribal government level. And again, I don't think that was her intent, but I think that's probably partly why the flag's symbols have endured for 100 years, is because it conveys, very simply, in some ways, the complexities of what it means to live in Oklahoma.
I think it means exactly what it says. Oklahoma is land of the red man. This flag has much more to that when you put that shield on it. That's a prayer of my people for a millennium.
The great thing about a state flag is that it should unite the peoples of a state together. It should be a symbol that we can all join together underneath that symbol, and it should point us to the future as well as reminding us about the past. And our state flag certainly does that. You know, Oklahoma, for a large part of itself, it started out as Indian territory. And so to have an Osage shield on the Oklahoma state flag, it points us back to those roots of always being this place that was designated Indian territory. And then when you add the symbols of peace, like the olive branch and the calumet, it really points us toward the idea that we should be working together toward a better and a brighter future, that we should work to see the good in each other, that we should really try to join together to make sure that we have a prosperous and free Oklahoma. And so I think all of that is represented in our beautiful Oklahoma state flag.